Okay, roll call for Senate revenue. Senator Case.
Present.
Senator French.
Here.
Senator Ide.
Here.
Senator Pappas.
Here.
Chairman McEwen.
Here.
Everyone present, Mr. Chairman.
Control property tax exemption applicability. Take it away, Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to speed us up here. Mr. Chairman, in the environmental quality statute, in Title 35, there is an exemption for the installation of pollution control equipment. It's 3511-1103, and it's not in the revenue statute, it's in the environmental quality statute. And it says property exempt from ad valorem taxation or property taxes. And it relates to pollution control equipment that's, that a company has to install for the purpose of meeting a regulation and controlling pollution. And many companies use this exemption for equipment they've installed on their plants. It's common in the, for example, in a coal-fired power plant where they've had to retrofit pollution control equipment that's becomes exempt from taxation. In general, I think this is locally assessed property, so state assessor or local assessors regulate whether they get the exemption or not. But the problem is, so to date, mostly this is for when you have an existing plant and you add pollution control equipment to it. Could be a new plant but some of the equipment is pollution control. But we're now facing the possibility of having extremely large plants built whose sole purpose is to capture carbon dioxide from the air and sequester that or make it available for other uses potentially. But this is the direct air capture CO2 plants that are being talked about. These might be very huge, much bigger than things like an oil refinery, might rival some of the sizes of our gas plants, maybe even be bigger than like the Lysite gas plant. And so there would be billions of dollars in investment who has one function to capture CO2. And my worry, Mr. Chairman, was that this 3511-1103 left an avenue for those very large new facilities to be exempt from taxation. And so the bill was drafted, tried to figure out how to skin that cat and went down this route of saying that carbon dioxide is not pollution for purposes of qualifying for the exemption. And I think that works because I don't think anybody, that would get those plants that would be carbon capture plants and make sure that they would be paying property tax. And they should pay property tax, Mr. Chairman, because these will have enormous impacts on local governments where they're located. Gigantic facilities, years to build, lots of people to operate them, needs for roads, other facilities, big impact on communities. And that the entirety of the plant is for this purpose. It's not like a refinery that has all this taxable stuff but may have a little bit of pollution control equipment. There is a suggested amendment, and I'm good with this amendment, I'll tell you. It's brought, and you'll hear about it, that would narrow it down and make it for the sole purpose of capturing non-point source carbon dioxide. That's those kind of plants I'm thinking about. And I think the amendment would work well, and we'll let people testify and talk about that. I think maybe industry was a little bit scared that I was throwing too big of a net or a net with too small holes. I'm not sure what the right metaphor is, but they've kind of tried to fix it a little bit. And I'm certainly open to listening to them and think they might have a good solution. That's it.
All right, let's open it up for public comment.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Good to see you all again. And thank you to Senator Case for working with us on this. Yeah, so as I think you all know, the reason for this exemption is to mitigate the impact of what can be multi-million-dollar investment requirements levied by the federal government, sometimes the state, but usually it's the state via their responsibilities from the EPA to install pollution control equipment. When it was initially designed, we're talking about sort of the pollution control equipment we'd all be familiar with, NOx and SOx and those sorts of things, not just for coal-fired power plants, but for natural gas plants and the Trona industry and others. So the state stepped in and said, okay, they're being required to meet these, they have to meet these mandates, that to spend millions of dollars to do it. But it's solely for the purpose of that pollution control. It doesn't add to the value of the product being created. So we'll not attach property value to that pollution control equipment. So that was the purpose. The reason why we have the amendment in front of you is to try to make sure we capture what the senator is talking about there, without looping in, if a coal-fired utility or any other entity figured out how to economically attach carbon capture, CO2 emissions control. You've heard my colleague, Mr. Detai, talk about a lot about that. They're supportive of carbon capture for controlling emissions. If those requirements either stay or come back, or the courts require them, and we figure out a way to bolt it on, again, that doesn't provide value to the product. It's meeting a federal mandate. So what the amendment does is, has in front of you, it has a comma at the end of, it deletes what Senator Case has proposed there in what's before you, adds a comma on line 16 at the end of byproducts, and adds or facilities constructed for the sole purpose of capturing non-point source carbon dioxide. What the heck does that mean? Point source and non-point source are the terms that the EPA uses in pollution control about where it comes from. Point source is what it sounds like. You can identify where it comes from. A coal-fired utility, a direct air capture plant, theoretically, and you can control point source. Non-point source is just out there. We don't know where it comes from. So that would be what an example Senator Case brought up, which is a facility built specifically to capture CO2 from the air, non-point source. So it would keep the, if you pass the amendment, it would, if a DAC facility was built in Wyoming, it would apply the industrial property tax rate to that if they captured it and sequestered it. If they captured it and sent it to enhanced oil recovery, it's already outside of this because it's marketable in that case. It's a marketable product. So if they go to EOR, so it already would be, you'd have property tax in that case. If you're sequestering, you'd still have property tax under the amendment. So that's the amendment. The amendment would move us from opposed to a neutral. We couldn't full on support it, Mr. Chairman, because like every single other bit of our tax code, all throughout Wyoming's tax code, we try to write our tax code to incentivize construction and new projects in Wyoming. The senator mentioned large facilities, lots of workers, lots of construction. You know what that means? That means sales tax and more economic development, et cetera, through the Industrial Siting Commission and all that as well. So my preference is to not tax things that don't exist here. There's no DAC facilities proposed. There's no DAC facilities coming here. It's pretty hard to build a DAC facility at high elevation. It just doesn't work very well, is my understanding. So I'd prefer not to have it at all, but we could live with the amendment. Happy to take questions, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Obermuller, can you just give me a little high-level view of what's going on in this space right now with this, the issue that we're dealing with here on carbon capture or, environmentally, what are we looking at for industry moving in here to do this stuff? That's kind of what I'm saying. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator, I appreciate the question. So it's kind of multi-pronged, and there may be others in the room who want to speak to it, but let's talk about the regulation side first. The requirement to deal with CO2. There was, of course, the endangerment finding that CO2 is in fact a pollution, is a pollutant, I should say. That was EPA's finding. The Supreme Court did not overrule that. They also did not mandate it necessarily. So it's kind of an open question about what will happen in the current administration with respect to regulations in that sense. So that's the regulation side. On private business side, we've talked about this a lot. Carbon capture happens for the most part. Well, in Wyoming, it's captured right now exclusively for enhanced soil recovery. There are other projects that could happen down the road for sequestration, but those aren't online. Right now, it's enhanced soil recovery. When it comes to direct air capture, there are companies that are doing direct air capture in other places, and they're, to my knowledge, those are being, I shouldn't say exclusively because I don't know, but they're largely being used for enhanced oil recovery in that case as well. So in terms of direct air capture, like I said, I'm not aware of any proposed plans in Wyoming for a direct air capture facility. In terms of carbon capture, bolt-on carbon capture to coal-fired utilities, they're just not economical. We haven't yet cracked the nut on how to do it in a way that's economical. So I don't foresee that happening anytime soon either. But you know how my industry is with respect to innovation. We figure things out.
Well, that helps. Thank you.
Senator French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Obermueller, well, can you maybe expand on why this gives you pause? I mean, kind of with the neutral, so there's must be something that kind of makes you nervous, or maybe expand on that a little.
Mr. Chairman, Senator French, yeah, and I think my friend Mr. McKay might hit on that question too, but I kind of hit on it a little bit. If you think about Wyoming's tax code with respect to other industries, not just energy industries, but other industries writ large, we try, you think of the moratorium on wind and solar, you think of the tax incentives we give manufacturing and other firearms manufacturers and other manufacturing in Wyoming. We try to base our tax code on ways that can help bring those people here. So under the bill itself, I don't like going down the road of saying we're going to set the tax code to for something that's not here. We set the tax code that tries to say, we don't, you guys are out. The rest of them, we have tax code to help you come in, but you guys are out. I just don't like that philosophically. So that's why it would be opposed. With the amendment, it limits it enough, and the senator makes a fair case that if a large stack facility comes here as a standalone industrial facility, everybody else like that pays 9.5% property tax. And he's got a point on that one. It's just that they're not here yet. So do you understand that kind of where I'm at there? It's kind of a fine line, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
Real quick.
Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So are you seeing this being big business in the future? You kind of talk like there's really no big industrial facilities that are here right now, but what's the crystal ball look like in the future for that going forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In terms of direct air capture, I think the jury is still out on that. Some of my member companies, not in Wyoming, but in other places, have invested quite a lot in trying to explore it. And of course, under the previous administration, there was a lot of interest in helping explore that. Where that goes in the next 4 years, I think, you probably know as much about that as I do. It's an open question about how big and how successful these can be.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Case.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think we could talk about and Mr. Obermueller and I discussing whether this is really going to possibly happen in Wyoming. Our Wyoming Business Council had a press release about a project. A direct air capture project is coming to Wyoming, and it's called Project Bison. And it's a U.S. company developing direct air capture. The project aims to permanently remove and store 5 million tons of atmospheric CO2 annually by 2030. So that was from our Wyoming Business Council about a proposed entity to come to Wyoming. There's certainly been others. Whether they come to fruition or not, I don't know. But I don't think they should come here with the idea thinking that they're going to be tax-free. I think we need to tell them up front, we want to talk about this. There is a program under the federal government. The bipartisan infrastructure bill provided $3.5 billion for some direct air capture hubs and subsidizing direct air capture technology. There's I believe the incentives from the federal government are like $600 a ton to prove up a direct air capture. It's astronomical, but we would get run over. I certainly agree with Mr. Obermueller. I think he's got a point about our being higher up. There's just less air in our air. And so the technology has to work a little harder, but certainly the Wyoming Business Council seems to be going after it.
Mr. Chairman, just very briefly, Project Bison is pulled out of that project.
Yeah.
There's no current project under consideration.
Okay, any other questions? Well, thank you for your testimony. Will you hang out for a little while, please? Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman?
Please.
Rennie
I
McKay.
thought you guys were together.
Well, pretty close on this issue, but my name is Rennie McKay. I'm the president of the Wyoming Business Alliance. And so Business Alliance is the private sector business advocate in the state, and we have members from every industry just about in Wyoming, every corner of the state, and every size of business as well. So this was a bill as it came out, we were opposed to, and just have some concerns. I think, and Mr. Obermueller certainly set the stage for it. So there is this situation where we could have a scenario where the federal government declares that CO2 is a pollutant, and that was how the Clean Air Act did look like it was headed. And that would have meant to keep coal-fired power plants open, you would have had to put CO2 capture on them to keep them going, which I think was the intent of the original legislation is if those federal regulations were coming down, we wouldn't make the utility pay for that equipment to add on. So with, I think Mr. Obermueller did an excellent job. There's still some uncertainty about what could happen with that, and there's uncertainty about let's look out the next couple of decades about what could happen right at the federal level. So that definitely gave us pause. But also from the Business Alliance standpoint, we really take the approach that what we're trying to do is help our members grow in Wyoming. And there is an opportunity here, I think, to grow the economy. As you talked about, Senator Wright had asked about the kind of what could happen. When you look at CO2, there could be regulations that require it. And there are also entities and companies that are looking at how do you take CO2 out of the product, and that can be cement too. So when you talk about point source, that can be at a cement factory. Folks have looked at that even as near as Colorado to do carbon capture on cement facilities. And then ideally, we think at the Business Alliance, we're really excited about the idea of adding value then and helping enhance oil recovery with that, because then more severance in Wyoming, more growth for our oil and gas companies, and more benefit all across the board. You can look at, folks have looked about trying to do taking CO2 out of natural gas. So again, out of more ways that there could end up being uses for the CO2 elsewhere, but that it's not in the gas and it adds another market for those folks. So it is really about innovation and the opportunity that there are some things that could happen in our future that could help Wyoming grow. And so do just really appreciate that you're considering this issue and thinking about how there could be this interplay with what comes next. And point source or non-point source, kind of how you define that, you know, some folks want to look at how can you create hydrogen out of natural gas or coal, and then what do you do with the CO2 in that process of creating the hydrogen? So I don't know if you'd call that point source or non-point source, but just, you know, those are some of the things that could be there in the future that could be exciting and could help our businesses in Wyoming grow. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions?
Just a quick one.
Senator Ide?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just, you know, part of this bill is specifying that carbon dioxide is not pollution for purposes of an exemption. What's on the books right now as far as how carbon dioxide, I mean, is it in law that it is a pollutant, or where is that, or how's that described, and how does this affect that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, yeah, thanks. Again, it was the endangerment finding from the EPA is currently, as it is that CO2 is a pollutant. And in the Supreme Court case about their clean power plan, where the Supreme Court overruled the clean power plan, but they did not say to the EPA that they were wrong about the endangerment finding of CO2 as a pollutant. So the current state of affairs is that it is a pollutant from a national level. Now, you know, and I know, in Wyoming, it's a commodity that's useful. So, you know, that debate is irritating, but that's the state of play right now. So that's why if we switch to this, we get out of that and we can have a little bit more balanced tax code.
Go ahead, Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, so the statute that we're talking about, 3511-103, just talks about pollution control equipment. It doesn't list pollution, doesn't say particulates, it doesn't say sulfur dioxide, doesn't say anything like that. It just says if you install equipment to go after pollution, it can qualify for this exemption. And I think with Mr. Obermuller's proposed amendment, I think that would actually accomplish that goal for retrofitting plants or any additional or new plant that has CO2 control as part of its makeup. But for these very large plants that you know, some people think is very important, and they're gigantic. They could be bigger than like the Lysite gas plant and not pay any property taxes from the start. I would prefer that we not let them qualify for an exemption up front, and then we could negotiate with them when they come in. These are huge plants. They're gonna have plenty of lobbyists, and they're gonna, they'll be able to talk to us. So I think we'd be better served to have something in place before they come here. It gives us a way to make sure that they do make contributions to our tax system.
There's a lot of plants and trees that might argue CO2 isn't a pollutant. I think there's a lot of human beings that are glad we have CO2 in the air. So I find that pollutant argument, as you said, frustrating.
Yeah.
Hey, I got an idea. Require everybody to wear a mask, and we can capture the CO2 they breathe out, and then require them to turn that in somewhere.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh,
only
never mind.
if you
That
send
won't
it to EOR, Mr. Chairman.
So, and Mr. Chairman, the university's worked very, very hard to identify geologic formations all around Wyoming where CO2 can be sequestered. And they have done a lot of mapping and there are a lot of geological formations. The Wyoming Business Council has been working this very hard and arguing that this is a future industry for Wyoming. Project Bison, of course, hasn't come to fruition. They pulled out, but that doesn't mean that somebody else couldn't come in, especially if the money continues to flow or increases in the future from our federal friends that go down this road.
Anybody else? Well, thank you. Any other public testimony?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jody Levin. I'm here on behalf of the Trona industry. In the spirit of brevity, I'll say, as drafted, the industry did have a number of concerns about the bill. I did visit with Senator Case about those concerns. They install pollution control equipment in order to meet their Title V Clean Air Act permit requirements. So Mr. Obermueller did share the amendment with us. The industry does support that and believes that alleviates their concerns.
Thank you. Any questions?
We should listen to industry.
I think I've solved the problem with the mask. Mr. Deti.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Travis Deti with the Mining Association, and I appreciate the good Senator Case's comments a few seconds ago. I would just say ditto to Ms. Levin's comments.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
That's the testimony I like right there.
Anybody else? Anybody online? I guess we will close public comment and work the bill. What's your pleasure, committee?
Move the bill.
Second.
Moved by Senator Case, seconded by Senator Ide.
Mr. Chairman, I'd offer the amendment we received from Mr. Obermueller and industry.
The amendment's been moved by Senator Case, seconded by Senator Pappas. Any comments on the amendment? All in favor?
Aye.
Signify. Let me finish. Signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The amendment has passed. On to the bill. Page 1. Page 2.
Mr. Chairman, this is of course where that amendment already tracks in on line 16. So I think that does it. It would just remove the existing language, which we did, and then after byproducts and before the period, it would insert or facilities construction for the sole purpose of capturing non-point source carbon dioxide. That's the amendment we already approved.
Page 3, section 3. I do have one question for Chairman Hinson, or Director Hinson, excuse me.
Mr. Chairman, Brenda Henson, Department of Revenue.
Do we know how much the existing tax exemptions, I don't want to say, well, I'm going to say cost the state in revenues?
Mr. Chairman, the State Board of Equalization does track that information specific to the pollution control exemption. I don't have that with me currently, but I'd be happy to share that. But it's within their, so all county assessors are required to provide that valuation to the State Board of Equalization as part of their abstract that's due June 1st of each year. So we can get that number for you.
And is that program primarily run through the county assessors?
We do, Mr. Chairman, have some companies that apply for pollution control exemption on state assessments as well. Although there's no statutory requirement that the department provide those values to the state board, we voluntarily do. So we will have a total number for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We ready for roll call?
Mr. Chairman, can I make one last appeal? I think this protects us from a plant coming in, thinking that they're not going to pay any property taxes, and being a very, very large facility, like the Project Basin proposal. Maybe maybe none of those are gonna happen, but having this on the books won't affect that. And if there was a need to create an incentive in the legislature to encourage that kind of activity, we could cross that bridge at the time it happens. They definitely take many years to develop their project, and we'd have time to listen to the pitch and react and come up with any kind of incentives that we might want to do through the business council or through the tax structure or through regulations. So this would get them to come to us at the table, maybe than just coming in and thinking they're going to qualify. So I hope we can all support this exemption, or removal of this exemption.
Okay. Donna, you want to call the roll?
This is a roll call vote on Senate File 61, pollution control property tax exemption applicability as amended. Senator Case?
Aye.
Senator French?
Aye.
Senator Ide?
Aye.
Senator Pappas?
Aye.
Chairman McEwen?
Aye.
We have 5 ayes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're starting to tighten up. Oops, spoke too soon. Here comes Larson.
Next thing we'll take up is Senate Joint Resolution 10. Take it away, Senator Larson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and committee, thank you for hearing this. Last one maybe, huh, of the year. This is a joint resolution to amend our Wyoming Constitution to specify the power and control of taxation and spending to the legislative, it says department and executive department, but I'd think that ought to be legislative branch and executive branch. Essentially what we're, if we go to page 2, Article 2, Section 2, we'd add a new section, control of taxation and spending, and I'm just gonna read it because that might be the quickest. The power of taxation and spending is reserved to the people and to the legislative department and executive department. The legislature may by law delegate local taxing and spending power to political subdivisions, providing that the power of taxation and spending is exercised by persons whose elected term of office does not exceed 4 years. The creation of the debt authorized by this Constitution and legislature may by law delegate the payment of debt service and establishment of taxation rates to accomplish that service to the executive branch as a ministerial task, and the judicial department may enforce the performance of these duties. The main section is that I'm bringing this is Part B, and it states that notwithstanding any other provision of this Constitution, For the operating costs of public schools, the legislature shall provide a formula for funding, and the formula shall be subject to judicial review for the constitutional compliance. This is the main part. The legislature shall fund the formula by appropriation, and the amount of this appropriation shall not be subject to judicial review. In the event of the appropriation is insufficient to fund the spending provided by the formula, the spending shall be reduced by uniform percentage. And then section 2 just designate what the Secretary of State will have put on the ballot for the citizens to decide. I do have some correction or some, I think, changes on that part, and I would hope I might get a little advice from the committee. But I'm going to leave it at that. Essentially, the whole bill is meant to say we're going to come up with a formula to fund our schools, which we already do. But mainly is to say that we will appropriate the amount that we do appropriate is our choice. And if we don't have enough funds in there, if it's insufficient, then the spending shall be reduced by a uniform percentage. So just taking this, taking it away from the court when they tell us how much we're going to spend. That's probably all I have. I would help on the bottom part, would ask, I'm not sure, because what was put in there is already in the Constitution, lines 8 through 12. I would suggest we maybe reword that, that the proposed amendment states, just so the people know, the legislature shall provide the formula for funding schools which can be subject to judicial review, and the legislature shall fund the formula which shall not be subject to judicial review. That's pretty much it. I don't know if you have questions or not.
Questions? Senator Ide.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Larson, would you consider an amendment that states obligation to provide public education altogether be eliminated? I'm just kind of having a little fun with this. It's really not the role of the government. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? I'm assuming you don't want to bring the amendment.
Not today.
Okay, you want to stand by? Thank you, Senator Larson. Any public comment? Guess we will close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
It's been moved by Senator Ide,
Second.
seconded by Senator French. Okay, any comments on page 1? Page 2? Senator Case.
I'm trying to understand what it means when we provide a formula. Is that like our model? Is that what that is?
Mr. Chairman, I would say that is what it is, yeah.
Okay, so, Mr. Chairman, the formula is like the model. So we create the model for funding public schools, and we submit that to judicial review, but the amount of money, it is available for judicial review, so someone could sue us about the model. But the amount of money that we use to go into the model would not be something that people could sue on. That's basically what this would say.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. Yep. Sorry.
Thanks.
Senator Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The comments from the good senator next to me here, who would those people be that would potentially sue us? Maybe the bringer of the bill could answer that. You know, obviously you've got the lobbies out there, the education lobbies and whatnot, I guess, is that districts, yeah. Thanks,
Mr. Chairman, I would agree, probably the 3 or 4 that keep doing it, WEA and districts and school boards. Not sure who else.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll close public comment. We already closed public comment.
There was a
So we should call the roll.
I thought there was a proposal to change the ballot language to be more clear. And I did think that that cleared it up.
Mr. Chairman, and I didn't add all I wanted on that, if I could speak on that again.
Please.
I think we do need something there also clarifying the first subparagraph A, that the power of taxation and spending is reserved to the people and to the legislative branch and executive branch, period. That's what I was thinking might be, I would think we should put in there, and delete what's on there, 9 through 12. And then state, the legislature shall provide the formula for funding the schools, which can be subject to judicial review. Period. The legislature shall fund the formula which shall not be subject to judicial review. And I think that would be important for the citizens to see what actually we're trying to do on the amendment.
Mr. Chairman?
You want to bring that amendment?
Yeah, if somebody can track that in, good, we might as well bring a standing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, just trying
Senator
to, do you have that language that we could track? You want to bring it as a committee of the whole or a standing committee amendment?
Let's do it here.
I'd rather we did
Okay.
it here. I can give it to the secretary. I just handwritten, wrote it. It's just handwritten. I didn't.
How about just giving it to Donna and see if she reads it, and then we can agree with it. Figure she's the one that's got to get it down, so that's she understands it. It'd be worse if we were trying to do it.
For me.
Mr. Chairman, I believe I understand the amendment. I'm just going to read it back as I understand it. So the amendment would be on page 3 to delete lines 8 through 12.
8 through 12.
And then insert number 1, well, there's no number, but anyway, insert the sentence, "The power of taxation and spending is reserved to the people and the legislative branch and executive branch." And then second insertion would be, the proposed amendment states, "The legislature shall provide the formula for funding schools which can be subject to judicial review. The legislature shall fund the formula which shall not be subject to judicial review. So that's the amendment as I understand it.
I would move that.
Mr. Chairman, just one correction, I'm sorry. I put in branch in there, and in the Constitution, it does say department. So I would think we should be consistent. Sorry.
It's okay. Friendly.
Did you get that, Donna? Can we
I
include
did,
that?
so, so the change would be the first insertion would now be the power of taxation and spending is reserved to the people and the legislative department and executive department. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
Yes. Okay, are we ready to vote on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The amendment passes. Back on the bill, we've gone through that. Donna, you want to call the roll?
This is a roll call vote on Senate Joint Resolution 10, Legislative and Executive Authority, Taxation and Spending, as amended. Senator Case,
No.
Senator French,
Aye.
Senator Ide,
Aye.
Senator Pappas.
No.
Chairman McEwen.
Aye.
We have 3 aye and 2 no, Mr. Chairman.
That has passed the committee. Any other business? We
Good
will
work on our
adjourn
Senate
this
file.
committee
That was the quickest one we've had, I think.
by far.
Less than an hour.
We've worn them all out. They all done.
So is that our last Senate file?
I think so.
We will not have a committee meeting Monday.
Can you believe that?
Why no meeting Monday?
We have no bills.
Oh, yes. that makes a lot of
Imagine
sense.
we'll be in at 8 on Monday.
Yeah, Monday's the last day for general file.
So if your bill's not up on general file on Monday, you're done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
So if, say we have a whole plethora of